series. We have been there for 5 days now for the summer school on labor and agrarian questions in the Global South. So today we are going to have a conversation to just recap some of the main ideas that have been shared from our different regions of origin or specialization. So first of all, I would like to thank you for accepting to take part in this conversation, roundtable. And the first question would be about the main changes in labor in your respective country by giving concrete example, or the agrarian question in general. So who would like to talk first?
I am Manish from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. And if you would ask this question related to India, then I would say recently, just 2.5 years ago, new government came into the power, and from the date it took the power, and there are massive attack on the labor rights and labor laws. So I would just mention two things. One related to one particular state, province of India, where the labor laws was amended, and it was earlier it used to be there is a law regarding how much labor at once one company can retrench. So this law was changed. Earlier it used to be 30 workers at a time. So any company can retrench 30 workers at a time. But just last year or last to last year, the law was amended, and the figure was increased to 100. So now, if any company wants to retrench a worker up to 100, they need not any permission from the government. They can do it anytime. So this is the situation of organized sector, which is very tiny in case of India. The second example that I would like to put here, that is related to child labor. The Child Labor Act was amended, and very recently, just 2 months ago, it was mentioned that if the working age has been reduced, and the definition has been changed so that child labor can also be incorporated in the workforce. So this is the situation we are facing in India related to labor rights and labor issues.
Well, I could proceed.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Boaventura Monjane from Mozambique, and I'm now doing my PhD in Portugal at the University of Coimbra. Well, I will generally explain the agrarian situation and question in Mozambique. Maybe starting from saying that during the process of the struggle for liberation and for independence in Mozambique, the peasantry played a great role. Without the peasantry and without the rural people, it would never be possible to win the struggle. And after independence, we had a very good process of land distribution and land reform, which ended up by having a very progressive land law, which is said to be one of the best in Southern Africa, because it gives the rural people the rights to decide in the management of lands. But obviously in the last years there has been a pressure to privatize land and change the law. That pressure comes from the World Bank and the IFM and other investors that are interested in Mozambican land, because it's very fertile for agriculture, but there are also riches in terms of natural resources and stuff. So the peasantry now in Mozambique are struggling to defend the land law, but also defend the process of land reform that took place through the process of independence. There are lots of things happening. People are being displaced from their lands, and unfortunately the government policies have not been have been inimical to the peasantry, as to say, because they are cooperating more with the investment, because they believe that the way to go in Mozambique is to privatize land in order to get foreign investment and develop the country. But the peasantry that is also organized through the Mozambican Union of Peasants have a completely different narrative, where they defend national sovereignty, but also they defend the right to manage and control land.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Let me chip in. My name is Mazwi, Zimbabwe, Sam Moyo African Institute for Agrarian Studies. Just to give a brief background on the Zimbabwe situation. I'm sure we noted that there was a massive redistribution of land which occurred since the early 2000s. And from there we saw many former farm workers who were working on farms being allocated land, people from the communal areas which were unfertile also got land, and some urbanites they also get access to land. Then thereafter, that was real empowerment, the redistributive element. But then what we see thereafter, we see a total cut-off from finance, which directly affected the newly resettled farmers, engineered of course by the Bretton Woods institutions and some Western governments, because the Zimbabwean government chose to become radical. So what we saw now thereafter in the mid-2000s to late, we saw a reinsertion of capital, and that reinsertion of capital comes through private players, corporate companies who are financing now the production of tobacco crops. And we've seen now the emergence of contracting farming as a major source of funds for the farmers. And talking about the labor question, we know that farmers are now in a precarious condition as a result of contract farming, in that they remain indebted to these contracting firms, which forces them to continue under those contracting arrangements. They are largely exploitative. If you look at what the farmers get from that tobacco crop, sugar crops, etc., and many other crops, you realize that they really get little from that crop, and they have little left to dispose. So I would say that from a Zimbabwean perspective, the reinsertion of capital is put the farmers in a really difficult situation. So there is need actually to see that the government protects the farmers themselves, and also to provide much more support to farmers. So that is the major question in Zimbabwe: how do we finance the farmers? Because when left to the market forces, the farmers are left vulnerable. So that is the situation of labor.
But maybe going forward, it would be interesting to specify if it's all farmers that are not benefiting, or if there are portions like middle scale that are benefiting from some of this. Dzifa, who wants to? Ricado?
Yeah. My name is Ricado. I'm at Johns Hopkins University, but I'm from South Africa. Yeah, South Africa is an important question, but it's a question that one also has to trace historically. So land and labor has always been central in the formation of capitalist development. And so a lot of people were dispossessed to provide, with the discovery of minerals and diamonds, labor. So in our context, landlessness has been a means of exploitation. Now, with the transition to democracy, where the formable liberation movement made a new liberal turn, we have seen what people have classified as South African as a classic case of where you can sort of observe Marx's reserve army of labor. Over the period, you have seen massive levels of unemployment since '94. Of course, there are two definitions of unemployment. The narrow official unemployment rate would be at 27%, but if you use the broader definition of people of what they say have given up searching for work, it's in about 34%. With that, one see also the share of labor's income has also declined in terms of wages and other things. Now, that brings me to the other point, and if we look at South Africa, what we're experiencing is agrarian crisis, but an agrarian crisis from the perspective of labor and small-scale farming. So these are the two structures that we have in South Africa, right? You have big white commercial farming where there's consolidation and concentration, and then you have subsistence farmers who are struggling. So with the transition, we have seen a complete neoliberal restructuring in agriculture, which led to concentration and consolidation in that sector. With regards to other forms of labor, we've also seen accompanied with that a massive explosion of what people call slums or informal settlements. But its composition are always changing. Now, how does that tie to land? Because if there is a shock, as some people have said, that people have no other means of necessarily go back to the countryside, because our land patterns are very unequal, right? Since democracy, only about 9% of the land has been transferred to black people. And so we are sitting with huge land inequalities. There's about 50,000 white commercial farmers that owns approximately 70 to 80% of the land who are engaging in large-scale agriculture. So that is just as a starting point. Of course, one then leads yourself what type of struggles and how does labor respond and the forms of organization. But
we come back to that.
Yeah.
It's the fourth question.
Okay.
The Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research, University of Ghana. I think our agrarian question can be linked to the changing dynamics of agriculture since the colonial times. You know, Ghana has not had this large-scale agriculture. It's a smallholder-led, and the colonial project did not intend to take land for agriculture that way. They took lands for mining, but not for agriculture, because the smallholders were producing what they needed. So what they did was just you do expansion, which is accumulation from the farmers themselves were acquiring lands in different places. Many of those farmers relied on migrant labor. So how do we link this to labor and then the land and the labor issue? They merge this thing called sharecropping. Sharecropping is both a land tenure system and a labor issue, because this is a farmer who comes to you, you give the land, in return you farm and then you share the crop. So it's a labor issue, it's also a land issue. So that has been the case for cocoa. And then as the 10 of the 1980s, the special adjustment program, many farmers were squeezed. So many of these laborers had to return to their family farms, or many farms could not do well because there was fall in commodity prices. Okay. But recently, in recent times, there are some large farms, mainly linked to this value chain, global commodity value chains. So farmers are now trying to expand. They have larger farms, some of them, especially in some products like mango, pawpaw, fruit crops. And then, of course, recently from the 2012, cassava has become one of the major crops. Why has cassava become a major crop? The state has decided that people who manufacture with raw materials will have concessional duty. So it encouraged multinational companies like Guinness Ghana to develop cassava brand beer. So right now in Ghana, between 2012 and today, we have 2 brands of cassava beer. So that also immense these cassava farmers. Cassava farmers are the poorest in the country, and cassava is the most wasted crop, 50% of it. So now cassava has seen industrial upliftment. Okay, so farmers are now outgrowers for Guinness Ghana, for the breweries, and so they are family farms, but then they have to shift the production from staple cassava production to industrial cassava production. So briefly, I think that is the picture in Ghana.
So maybe yes, two more reactions before.
Yeah, hello, my name is Pablo Gilolmo. I'm from Spain. I'm in Portugal now doing my PhD in the Center for Social Studies, the University of Coimbra, and I'm working in Namibia. And I would like to take the issue from something that is related to labor, which we have been debating about also these days, which is the issue of class differentiation. Because we have had some debates about if class differentiation can happen from below, if it has limitations in its occurrence from below, and at some point it needs some intervention from above. In my case study where I'm working, it was initially the colonial government that intervened in order to produce a differentiation between farmers. So they allocated communal land to some farmers that they identified as more able to succeed in commercial farming, and they demarcated land and they allocated them farms and supported them with resources, and that was a first stage of induced class differentiation from above. Now this in the 60s didn't succeed completely, but it's true that it created a dynamic in which the process continued on its own a little bit until the 80s, in which they made a second attempt and they didn't succeed completely either. So what you have in that region now is a lot of illegal fencing, people that has grabbed land for commercial farming, urban elites and elites from the place itself. However, the process does not take off. They don't succeed. So the phase now is that there's a third intervention from the part of the state in investing, in supporting these more benefited farmers already in the past, in order to make them be able to be successful in the world. So what I see in my place is that there is no class differentiation from below at all, and that even though sometimes there is some push for it and then it's left on its own, it gets stagnated and it needs more support from above, and it's not taking off unless they are invested. So I think it's one case which can illustrate a little bit these debates that happen.
So I'm Stella, and I'm from Brazil, University of Brasilia. I just would like to address the question from another point of view, maybe, because as you all must know, we are facing a very tough moment in Brazil, politically and economically. We have just suffered a coup d'etat in our elected president, against our elected president, Dilma Rousseff. And that new government is taking measures against working rights that have been conquered by the working people and along the 20th century, and so working rights are under threat, especially in what concerns to social security. We have a major crisis coming up on social security. Also, that new government, just to mention something related to the agrarian question, it has extinguished the Ministry of Agrarian Development. Sorry for the bad English. And which is precisely the ministry that addresses the interests of the small farmers, if you can say that, or small rural workers. The government has also announced that all the public money addressed to social policies will be frozen for the next 20 years, and that's certainly something that will impact the workers' life for the next years. So just like to mention that for now.
Santosh, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I start from where Ricado stopped, basically the land question in India. So first is that there is scarcity of land because as I did my presentation, around 93% of the rural households basically are either landless or marginal or small farmers. So if I say for landless, that is around 41% of the total rural households. So means that those landless people are either working as agricultural laborer on some other's land, or they are migrating to some other cities for alternative livelihood. And from the even marginal and small farmers are also working on others' land for livelihood, or they are also migrating. So what happening with this land and labor question is something, first of all, agriculture with this neoliberal project, if we see the government data, we will find that there is decline in subsidies, so means that cost of agriculture is going up at one hand. So agriculture is becoming non-viable at first instance, and then if these as the definition says that they are unskilled workers. So if they go into the cities, if they go into the urban peripheries to find a job, they find something, they work hard for 10 hours, 12 hours, sometimes overtime, but they get suppressed wages because there are a lot of influx of unskilled laborers into urban peripheries. So means that they are signing something around 15,000 Indian standard rupee, but they get half of that. So in this way, first of all, that they are leaving agriculture as occupation and then going into cities, and they are getting less and less there. So you can understand the way agriculture is becoming non-viable, and when they go out for livelihood, they are also, and in all these, when you consider women as labor force, that is something, it becomes more difficult for them to leave agriculture and go somewhere outside, leave family and go somewhere outside, and then they are basically not getting the wages. So it means that the land and labor question, day by day, like it is South Africa or some other African countries or Latin American countries or India, it is somewhere going parallel to each other.
And thank you for bringing this global South perspective. And what you last said is important, as you were insisting on the gendered nature of the labor question. So that's where we will take it from and try to analyze how these different dynamics that you depicted in your different contexts are influenced and structured by other issues such as gender, caste, class, race, ethnicity, etc. So, who would like to? And what are, maybe we can bring the second question so that we gain time. What have been the different reactions of the people in general, different class, different social constituencies to those changes that you have been talking about?
I'm Twinkle. I'm from Jawaharlal Nehru University, India. And as Santosh spoke about it, that gender question is something that we cannot just do away with. And when it comes to land and labor, gender is, in Indian case, something which is not just an identity in itself, but is coming up with multiple identities, such as, say, religion is very important, caste is very important, class is very important. And the land question specifically, because as Manish pointed out, that even if there is a land and labor available, it is easy for men to go out and work, but women are just stuck there. And to move out from agriculture and to speak of activities like construction work and so on, I find it very funny. Always I have found that whenever some construction or housing work is going on, the signboard will always read men at work. But interestingly, it is the woman who is doing basically the cementing work and carrying off the bricks. And sometimes I have seen that it's really, she's carrying like pillars of bricks, and on one side she's also carrying the child. So these are the issues that in terms of formulating the policy and regulating and implementing the policies we need to keep in mind. So
That is important.
So, I just wanted to make one identities in the agrarian question and agrarian crisis. I have a certain different opinion from what you have just said, but I am not. I do not want to disagree with your position that different identities like gender, caste, class, race should not be taken up. But what I am saying, especially in case of India, what we see, the agrarian community as in itself is very deprived. So what we can see, if you go to some agricultural worker, if she is female, then there are multiple layers of deprivation she is facing. If first because of her occupation, that is because of agrarian crisis, that is there. If she is Dalit, then the different Dalit means the schedule is the lower caste, then because of that caste, then again if because she is woman, she has to face some other problem. But what I am of the view that when we are addressing this, we have to locate something. What is the central problem? And for me, the agrarian crisis as a whole is the something that should be given priority, and then we can address very easily some other questions of different identities.
I think that's the whole importance of the question. It was not an affirmation from my part. I was asking how they are influenced, and what you were depicting actually is intersection. How it's all of your identities are intertwined and defined. How you are affected by one issue or another. But I do respect what you say. Yes, Sabatho Nyamsenda, as we haven't.
Okay, thank you. My name is Sabatho Nyamsenda. So, first of all, maybe I will speak quickly on the first question linked to the second question. Yeah. So shortly, as I think my colleagues have said, neoliberalism was basically came as an attack on labor, because the general trend was that labor was increasingly taking more concessions from capital, and therefore it came basically to attack and restore property in the hands of capital. In Tanzania, when neoliberalism was adopted, basically it was an attack on labor rights in the first place. When factories were privatized, the so-called new owners, private owners, simply closed down factories and turned them into warehouses for storing imported goods. So thousands, hundreds of thousands of workers were laid. And then we have another phase of attracting foreign direct investment. I think, as I said in the presentation, most of it went into the mining sector. And smallholder, small-scale or artisanal miners were displaced. So you have a situation where giant standard comes and displaces 500,000 smallholder miners, and then it employs only less than 2,000 workers. So that is basically a dispossession of jobs. And where do they go? As we have seen in the Indian case, the same thing that happens in Tanzania. They flock like in numbers, in thousands. They migrate to the cities. And what happens in the cities? You have all these processes of cleaning up the city and then expelling them. So like there, it's back and forth, going back to the rural and coming back to the urban. After the 2008 crisis, most of the capital now shifted. It's still, a lot of it is still going to the mining sector, but most of it now is also going to the agrarian sector. And there is massive land acquisition. Therefore, that also increases unemployment because people are dispossessed of their sources of livelihood. They flock into cities and all that. So these two questions are linked, the land and labor question. Now, with the history of Tanzania, it's very interesting comparing it to other countries. Like we can talk of struggles based on race,